She walked down the quiet streets of her neighborhood, the sun just beginning to rise, casting a soft glow on the trees and houses. People passing by greeted her with friendly nods, but she only offered a small smile. Her life seemed ordinary to anyone looking from the outside. She had a regular job, ran errands like anyone else, and kept to herself most of the time. But beneath that calm and ordinary exterior, she carried a lifetime of discipline and skill that very few people knew about. Her morning started like every other. She brewed a cup of coffee, black, no sugar, and looked out the window, observing the subtle changes in her neighborhood. She noticed every detail, the way the mailman lingered a little too long, the new tire tracks in a neighbor's driveway, even the pattern of birds in the trees. Some might have called it overthinking, but she had trained herself to notice things most people ignored. Attention to detail had been a part of her life for years, in ways no one could ever guess. At work, she was respected, but few knew the depth of her abilities. She worked efficiently, handled problems calmly, and never let her emotions dictate her decisions. People admired her for her confidence and focus, not knowing that the calm she displayed was forged through intense training, years of pushing herself beyond limits most would never consider. She had served her country in a role few could imagine, living through challenges that left lasting marks both physically and mentally. Now she was part of civilian life, blending in, keeping a low profile, and enjoying the peace she had earned. Her evenings were often spent jogging through the local park or practicing her skills in quiet spaces where no one could see. She didn't boast about her abilities, didn't seek recognition, and never let anyone sense that she could handle situations far beyond ordinary. To her, this was normal. The discipline, the strategy, the quiet strength, it was simply who she was. One afternoon, as she returned home from a small grocery run, she noticed something unusual. A police car was parked at the corner, the officer inside watching the street with an intensity that seemed out of place. She didn't panic. She observed, noting the details, his posture, the way he adjusted his sunglasses, the slight twitch in his hand. There was something off, something she couldn't ignore. She continued walking calmly, greeting neighbors along the way, all while keeping an eye on the officer. There was a history of tension in this community, small incidents that hinted at bias, but she had always avoided trouble. Trouble found some people, but she had learned to stay ahead, to read situations and to react before they escalated. This time, however, she sensed that trouble might be seeking her out. The next day she went about her routine, carefully noting the presence of the officer. He seemed to be appearing more often, at corners she walked by, at stores she visited. Something had triggered his attention, and instinct told her it was not going to be a simple misunderstanding. She prepared herself mentally, reviewing all the lessons learned from her past experiences. Staying calm, observing, and gathering information would be crucial. She didn't panic. She never panicked. Instead, she planned, quietly, invisibly, like a shadow moving through her own life. Her friends and neighbors noticed her alertness, but didn't understand why. She was still kind, helpful, and approachable, but there was a subtle edge to her movements, a readiness that came from training and experience. She walked with purpose, eyes scanning, ears listening, hands always aware of her surroundings. It wasn't fear. It was preparation. She knew that danger often came disguised as something small, something ordinary, and ordinary often hid extraordinary risk. Meanwhile, the officer's behavior grew bolder. He lingered near stores, made unnecessary comments to passers-by, and seemed to take particular interest in her routine. She did not react impulsively. She observed and calculated, noting every inconsistency in his actions. There were moments when he looked around nervously, moments when he glanced over his shoulder as if hiding something. She began to suspect that this was not just casual attention. He was planning something, and she intended to be ready. In the evenings, she reviewed her options quietly at home. She thought through scenarios, analyzed weaknesses, and reminded herself of her own strengths. Years of training had taught her that preparation and patience were often more powerful than immediate action. She practiced techniques silently, recalling strategies that had saved lives and prevented harm in the past. To anyone else, it might have seemed obsessive, but to her, it was simply preparation for an uncertain situation. Her intuition was sharpened by experience. She could read intentions, detect lies, and anticipate actions. This was why she had survived where others might have faltered. She trusted herself, and she trusted the process of careful observation and planning. The officer might have believed he had the upper hand, but he did not know who he was dealing with. Underneath her ordinary life lay a mind and body trained to respond decisively, strategically, and with precision. One evening, as she returned from a run, she noticed the officer following a little too closely. Instead of panic, she felt a quiet resolve. She would not be intimidated. She had faced challenges far greater than a biased officer. She used her surroundings, moved strategically, and made sure her path was unpredictable. The officer seemed frustrated, unaccustomed to someone who did not react with fear. She allowed him to reveal his impatience, his aggression, without her ever giving him the satisfaction of a visible reaction. Her careful planning extended to documenting unusual behavior. She made mental notes of dates, times, locations, and actions. She kept track of inconsistencies and small acts of intimidation. These would matter later, she knew. Evidence, no matter how small, could make a difference. She approached this with methodical patience, as she always had. She didn't need to confront him yet. She only needed to be ready. The community continued with their lives, unaware of the quiet tension building beneath the surface. She helped where she could, offered advice when asked, and maintained a calm presence. People admired her composure but did not know the storm that could arise if provoked. She kept herself grounded, balancing the ordinary with the extraordinary skills that lay just beneath the surface. Days turned into weeks, and the officer's actions became more deliberate. She noted each attempt at intimidation, each glance and comment. She never acted rashly, but she prepared for the inevitable confrontation. She was patient, knowing that timing was everything. One mistake by him, one overstep, would be enough to turn the tables. And when that time came, she would act decisively, not recklessly. Despite the tension, she continued living her life with dignity. Her strength was quiet, unassuming, and grounded in years of discipline. People around her felt her confidence even if they did not understand its origin. She was a protector in her own way, prepared to defend herself and others if necessary. Her past had shaped her into someone who could navigate danger with clarity and precision, and she would not allow prejudice or bias to control her story. As night fell one evening, she sat on her porch sipping tea, reflecting on the past and preparing for the future. She knew the officer's intentions were not yet clear, but she also knew that he had underestimated her. The calm she exuded was not weakness, it was strength under control. She trusted herself, her training, and her ability to turn any situation to her advantage. She was ready for what was coming, patient and vigilant, with every sense alert and every skill prepared. Her life might have seemed ordinary, but it was anything but. Beneath the surface, she was a force of focus, resilience, and courage. And while the world around her went about their routines, she was quietly preparing for the moment when she would show that ordinary appearances often hide extraordinary truth. That moment would come. And when it did, she would be ready to face it fully, unflinchingly, and with the precision of someone who had survived far greater challenges than the ones now approaching her doorstep. The following morning, she woke up feeling a quiet determination. She knew that the officer's behavior had escalated over the past weeks. It wasn't just a random pattern anymore. It was targeted. He was searching for something, and she was sure it involved her. She poured herself a cup of coffee and sat by the window, watching the neighborhood wake up. Every detail mattered. The way a neighbor's dog barked, the way the officer shifted in his car. She took mental notes, storing them for later, preparing herself for what she suspected was coming. By mid-morning, she left for the store, carrying herself with calm confidence. She could feel the officer nearby, watching, waiting. Her senses were alert, trained to notice even the smallest signs of manipulation or threat. She moved deliberately, taking routes she knew well but adjusting slightly, testing his reactions. He followed her for a few blocks, his presence aggressive yet clumsy, revealing more about his impatience and lack of control than he realized. She allowed him to think he had the upper hand while quietly observing and analyzing. Inside the store, she kept her movements casual, selecting groceries, interacting politely with the cashier. She noticed the officer appear at the entrance, pretending to browse, but his eyes locked on her. She smiled politely, nothing more, keeping her composure. It was clear he was planning something, but she had the advantage: preparation and observation. She had seen this type of behavior before, recognized the signs, and had learned how to handle it. As she left the store, he stepped forward, blocking her path. He carried a badge, a symbol of authority he intended to use against her. He asked questions sharply, demanding identification, claiming a minor complaint had been filed. She responded calmly, answering questions politely but refusing to allow his tone to intimidate her. Every movement was deliberate, every word measured. She knew that reacting with fear or anger would give him power, and she had never allowed anyone to control her in that way. When he tried to escalate the situation, suggesting she was involved in something illegal, she noticed his uncertainty. There were gaps in his story, inconsistencies in his approach. She listened carefully, keeping her tone steady, asking precise questions that highlighted contradictions. People nearby began to notice, but she remained calm, showing no signs of panic. The officer's confidence began to crack, his aggression masking the uncertainty growing inside him. She let him continue, pretending to be caught off guard, all while planning her next steps. Her mind ran through scenarios, recalling past experiences where patience and observation had won over force and intimidation. She knew that direct confrontation could escalate dangerously, but careful planning and evidence collection could dismantle his strategy without putting herself at risk. She stayed calm, letting his actions reveal his true intentions. As he accused her of wrongdoing, she made mental notes of every detail, the words he used, the tone, the order of events. She kept her body language neutral, maintaining control of her posture and eye contact. She remembered lessons from years of discipline. The smallest detail could be the key to exposing the truth. She recorded observations in her mind, knowing that each piece of information could later be used to reveal his misconduct. The officer became frustrated, raising his voice slightly, trying to assert dominance. She did not flinch. Instead, she subtly shifted her position, staying visible to bystanders, maintaining a calm presence. It was not fear. It was a strategy. She let his aggression show itself to the world, exposing the flaws in his behavior without raising her own voice. By the time she walked away, she had not only avoided trouble but had created the first pieces of evidence against him. At home later that day, she reviewed the situation carefully. She documented everything in detail: time, location, his words, his actions, and any witnesses who had been present. She prepared for potential escalation, thinking through the ways he might attempt to intimidate or frame her in the future. Every detail mattered. Her planning was meticulous, a reflection of her disciplined background. She was not just reacting. She was preparing for every possible outcome, ensuring she would remain in control. Over the next few days, she noticed more patterns. The officer seemed to be following her routes, attempting to catch her in moments he could manipulate. He made small attempts to intimidate neighbors or bystanders who might support her. She observed quietly, noting every movement, every tactic. She did not confront him directly, knowing that premature action could backfire. Patience and strategy would be her allies, and she had never relied on anything else. She also strengthened her presence in the community, connecting subtly with neighbors and shopkeepers. She asked casual questions about incidents or observations, building a network of indirect witnesses who could later validate her story. She was careful not to alarm anyone or reveal her full identity, but her intelligence and foresight created a web of awareness that extended beyond herself. It was subtle, quiet, and effective. One afternoon, she noticed the officer speaking to another neighbor, attempting to sow doubt about her character. She observed from a distance, taking note of his tactics, the words he used, and the way he manipulated tone to create fear. She understood his approach immediately. He believed that false accusations coupled with bias could sway opinions. But she had faced pressure, intimidation, and deception before, and she had never failed to uncover the truth. She remained calm, letting him make mistakes while carefully preparing her countermeasures. Her strategy involved gathering proof of both his behavior and her own innocence. She paid attention to subtle details, recordings where legal and permitted, witnesses who might later testify, and public behaviors that revealed his misconduct. She mapped out his patterns, noting repetition and predictability. Every step he took against her became a potential vulnerability. She was ready to use it when the moment arrived. One evening, as she returned from a jog, she noticed him lingering near a corner, waiting. She did not panic. Instead, she adjusted her route, ensuring that any action taken against her could be observed by others. She moved strategically, blending normal behavior with tactical awareness. The officer was growing impatient, clearly frustrated by her composure and subtle evasiveness. She allowed him to reveal his impatience without ever showing weakness herself. By now, she had gathered enough observations to understand his methods and intentions. She noticed his overconfidence, his lack of preparation for resistance, and his inability to control situations outside his expected patterns. He assumed authority alone was enough, but he underestimated someone trained to observe, analyze, and act precisely. Every interaction became a small advantage for her, every misstep a potential piece of evidence. At home, she reviewed her notes again, thinking through potential confrontations and their outcomes. She reminded herself of her capabilities and her training. She planned carefully, considering timing, witnesses, and documentation. Her mind worked methodically, ensuring that when the time came, she would not be caught unprepared. She felt no fear, only readiness. She knew the officer was trying to set a trap, but she was already steps ahead, anticipating every possible move. The days passed, and the tension increased. The officer's attempts to frame her became bolder, but she remained calm and focused. Her patience and observation had turned the situation to her advantage. Every false accusation, every hint of intimidation, provided her with insight into his behavior. She did not need to confront him immediately. She only needed to ensure she was prepared. She relied on her experience, discipline, and intelligence, confident that she could expose his actions when the time was right. Her preparation extended beyond documentation and observation. She also ensured her physical readiness, practicing control, movement, and awareness in case the situation escalated. Her body and mind were in harmony, trained to respond quickly and effectively. She moved with quiet confidence through the neighborhood, alert to every sound, every glance, and every gesture. She was aware of the smallest details, knowing they could determine the outcome. Eventually, the officer made a more direct attempt to accuse her publicly. He approached her with claims of illegal behavior, trying to intimidate her in front of witnesses. She responded with calm, factual answers, asking precise questions that highlighted inconsistencies in his accusations. Her composure and clarity drew attention from bystanders, making his aggression appear irrational and biased. The first signs of doubt appeared, not only in the officer's demeanor but also in the minds of those around him. She allowed him to continue, documenting every detail, ensuring that witnesses could later confirm what occurred. She did not panic or overreact. She relied on careful planning and evidence collection. Her discipline and preparation gave her the strength to face the situation with confidence. She knew that this confrontation was only the beginning, and that the ultimate resolution would depend on patience, observation, and strategy. By nightfall, she sat at home reviewing every action, every word, and every detail of the day. She had collected sufficient observations to begin constructing a defense against false accusations. Her experience taught her that knowledge and preparation were more powerful than anger or force. She felt confident, knowing that the officer's bias and impatience were creating his. She knew that waiting and observing could only go so far. The officer's attempts to intimidate and frame her were becoming bolder, and it was time to take careful action. Her mind was precise and methodical, trained to handle situations where information and preparation determined the outcome. She began to plan an investigation of her own, quietly gathering the proof that would protect her from false accusations. Her first step was to document everything meticulously. She wrote down the dates, times, and locations of every encounter with the officer. She noted his exact words, his tone, and the subtle ways he tried to manipulate situations. She kept track of witnesses, neighbors, and store clerks who had seen the events unfold. Every detail mattered, no matter how small, because she knew that in court, the smallest evidence could dismantle a false accusation. She approached this task with focus and patience, never letting frustration interfere with her observation. She also began to collect visual evidence where possible. She discreetly used her phone to capture moments when the officer behaved aggressively or suspiciously, making sure that nothing would reveal her intent to him. She studied his patterns, predicting where he might appear next and ensuring she could document the behavior without putting herself at risk. Her training as a Navy SEAL taught her how to move unnoticed, gather intelligence, and turn observation into actionable evidence. She relied on those skills now, not for combat, but for justice. Every day she moved through her neighborhood with a careful balance of normalcy and vigilance. She continued her routines, shopping, jogging, visiting neighbors, but always with awareness of the officer's presence. She observed how he interacted with other people, noting inconsistencies and subtle signs of bias. He was confident that he could manipulate situations, but she could see through the bravado. His lack of planning and over-reliance on authority made him predictable, and she kept track of each misstep. One afternoon, she visited a local coffee shop, a place she had gone to countless times. The officer appeared soon after, pretending to be a casual customer. She acted naturally, ordered her drink, and sat near a window where she could keep track of his movements. She noticed how he surveyed the room, looking for anyone who might support her or contradict him. She observed quietly, taking mental notes of his behavior, knowing that the smallest detail could be critical later. She left the shop calmly, having recorded every moment in her mind and with discreet photographs where legal. She also reached out subtly to neighbors and shopkeepers, engaging in casual conversations about recent events and community concerns. Without revealing the full situation, she asked questions that helped her understand whether anyone had witnessed the officer's behavior. Some neighbors shared observations that seemed minor at the time but would later become crucial evidence. She took mental notes and carefully documented everything in writing, keeping her actions calm and non-threatening. Meanwhile, the officer became more desperate. His impatience was evident in small ways. He lingered too long, his tone became sharper, and he tried to corner her in moments when others were not present. She did not respond with fear or anger. Instead, she used these moments to study him, noting the patterns in his aggression and the ways he overestimated his authority. Each interaction added to the picture she was building, showing a clear narrative of misconduct that she could later present to authorities. At home, she spent hours reviewing the information she had collected. She created timelines of events, cross-referenced witness accounts, and ensured that every detail was accurate. She analyzed his behavior, predicting the next moves he might make, and prepared counter-strategies. Her calm, methodical approach kept her focused, while the officer's own mistakes were beginning to create openings for her to act. Her training in observation and strategic thinking gave her confidence, knowing that patience and careful planning were powerful tools. She also prepared for personal safety. Though she had never needed to use her combat skills in this neighborhood, she remained alert to the possibility. Her body was ready, her mind sharp, and she kept herself fit and aware. Every movement was deliberate, every decision measured. She walked through streets, parks, and shops with the confidence of someone who could respond effectively to threats while still appearing ordinary. This balance of visibility and vigilance was critical to gathering information safely. As the days passed, she noticed more evidence of the officer's attempts to manipulate situations. He tried to involve other community members subtly, making claims about her that were false. She quietly documented these attempts, speaking with witnesses and noting everything in writing. The network of observations she was building began to show a clear pattern: repeated harassment, false accusations, and abuse of authority. She remained calm, knowing that this evidence would later dismantle his claims. One evening, she encountered a situation that could have escalated. The officer confronted her outside a store, attempting to accuse her of theft. She responded calmly, asking clear and specific questions about his claims. Her composure drew attention from people nearby, making the officer flustered. He realized that his attempt to intimidate her in public was failing. She left the scene with her dignity intact, having recorded the encounter discreetly and ensured witnesses were aware. This event became one of the most important pieces of evidence she would later use. Her investigation also involved analyzing the officer's past behavior. She quietly researched complaints, incidents, and other public records that revealed his tendencies toward bias and misconduct. Each discovery added to the picture she was building, showing that his actions were not isolated but part of a broader pattern. She kept this information organized, knowing that a clear presentation would be crucial if the situation reached formal proceedings. At the same time, she worked on strengthening her credibility with the community. She continued to help neighbors, offer advice, and participate in local events, showing her integrity and reliability. Her actions contrasted sharply with the officer's attempts to paint her in a negative light. People noticed her composure, intelligence, and helpfulness, though few understood the depth of her experience and training. This quiet presence became a protective shield, reinforcing the truth about her character. She also considered potential legal steps. She familiarized herself with procedures for reporting misconduct, gathering evidence and presenting a case. Her understanding of rules, regulations, and proper documentation ensured that she would be prepared when the time came to confront the officer formally. She did not act rashly. She relied on strategy and preparation, ensuring that every step was deliberate and effective. Throughout this period, her mind remained clear and focused. She maintained her routines, practiced her skills, and stayed alert to every detail in her surroundings. She was ready for any situation, confident that her preparation and observation would allow her to navigate the challenges ahead. Her calm approach and strategic thinking allowed her to remain in control, even as the officer grew increasingly aggressive and desperate. Finally, after weeks of careful observation and documentation, she felt ready to take the next step. The evidence she had collected, the patterns she had analyzed, and the witness accounts she had gathered created a strong foundation. She had shown restraint, patience, and intelligence, turning the officer's own behavior into a record of misconduct. She knew that the confrontation ahead would require courage, clarity, and precision, and she was fully prepared. Her investigation had not only protected her, but had also created a clear path toward justice. She was ready to present the evidence she had meticulously collected, knowing that her preparation, discipline, and integrity would allow her to stand strong against false accusations. She had remained calm, focused, and human throughout the process, ensuring that every action was both strategic and ethical. As night fell, she reviewed her notes one final time before sleep. Every encounter, every observation, every witness statement was carefully organized. She felt confident, knowing that she had done everything possible to prepare. She understood the importance of patience, strategy, and clear thinking. The officer's attempts to frame her had only strengthened her resolve, sharpened her observation, and reinforced her belief in the power of preparation. She slept with a sense of readiness, knowing that the next confrontation would reveal the truth. Her investigation had been thorough, her strategy careful, and her actions deliberate. She had turned a dangerous situation into an opportunity to expose wrongdoing and protect herself. The evidence was clear, the witnesses prepared, and her own composure unwavering. She was ready to face the challenges ahead with confidence, clarity, and the quiet strength of someone who had faced far greater trials and emerged stronger each time. The day of the court hearing arrived, and she approached it with the same calm focus that had guided her throughout the entire ordeal. She wore simple, professional clothing, nothing to draw attention, but every movement carried quiet confidence. Her mind was clear, organized, and prepared. She knew that the officer would try to assert authority, to intimidate and manipulate, but she was ready. Her evidence was solid, her witnesses reliable, and her own composure unshakable. The courtroom was a mixture of tension and curiosity. People whispered quietly, noting the unusual case, but she remained focused, scanning the room with alert eyes, noticing details others might miss. The judge, serious and attentive, presided over the case with impartiality, but she knew that clarity and preparation would make the difference. She had prepared meticulously, ensuring that each piece of evidence and each witness statement would be presented clearly and convincingly. When the officer presented his accusations, he tried to dominate the room with authority and confidence. He spoke with a tone meant to intimidate, to make her seem guilty before any evidence was even discussed. But she stayed calm, listening carefully, noting each inconsistency, each exaggeration. She allowed him to speak fully, not interrupting, maintaining her poise. To anyone watching, it was clear that her calmness contrasted sharply with his aggression. When it was her turn, she began to present her case. She spoke clearly, each word deliberate, explaining the situation without emotion, relying on facts and observations. She referenced the documented evidence she had collected: dates, times, locations, witness statements, and photographic evidence. Each piece was presented logically, showing a clear pattern of the officer's misconduct. Her composure and precision made her arguments compelling, leaving no room for doubt. Witnesses were called to corroborate her story. Neighbors, shopkeepers, and bystanders recounted what they had observed, confirming her version of events. Their statements aligned with her evidence, creating a strong narrative that undermined the officer's accusations. She had carefully prepared each witness beforehand, ensuring they remembered details accurately and could present them confidently. Every testimony added to the growing clarity of her innocence. The officer's demeanor began to crack. His earlier confidence gave way to frustration and uncertainty. He stumbled over details, contradicted himself, and revealed inconsistencies that she had predicted. She noted each slip, never reacting with visible triumph, only calmly recording the facts. Her strategic patience had forced him into a position where his own behavior revealed the truth. His attempts to manipulate perception had failed, leaving him vulnerable under scrutiny. Throughout the proceedings, she remained composed, calm, and attentive. She answered questions from the judge and attorneys clearly and accurately, never allowing emotion to cloud her responses. Her calm authority was unmistakable, drawing respect and credibility from those observing. She displayed the subtle confidence of someone who had faced far greater challenges and emerged stronger, not through aggression but through preparation, intelligence, and discipline. As the hearing progressed, the evidence painted a clear picture. The officers' repeated attempts to intimidate, falsely accuse, and manipulate situations became undeniable. Each act was documented, cross-referenced, and verified. The witnesses' statements reinforced the narrative of misconduct. The clarity of the evidence left little room for interpretation. She had turned weeks of careful observation and documentation into a comprehensive case that exposed his actions fully. When the officer tried to interrupt or challenge the evidence, she remained unflustered. She answered calmly, referencing specific details and confirming facts. Her steady demeanor highlighted the contrast between her disciplined approach and his reactive, desperate attempts to defend himself. Every moment reinforced her credibility and integrity, making the officer's accusations appear weak, biased, and unfounded. Her strategy extended beyond presenting evidence. She observed the reactions of those in the courtroom, noting the judge's attention, the jury's interest, and the responses of others present. She adjusted her approach subtly, emphasizing key points, clarifying confusing details, and ensuring that her narrative was understood. Her experience in high-pressure situations allowed her to read the room, adapting without losing focus or composure. Each small adjustment reinforced the impact of her testimony. The officer's frustration grew as his attempts to discredit her failed repeatedly. He became visibly flustered, raising his voice in desperation, trying to assert authority where none remained. She did not respond with anger or defensiveness. Instead, she continued with calm clarity, highlighting contradictions and emphasizing factual evidence. Her patience and preparation had created a situation where his own behavior further confirmed her case. As the day went on, the case built toward a turning point. The evidence, the witnesses, and her own calm, authoritative presence created a strong, undeniable narrative. The courtroom could see clearly that the accusations against her were false, that the officer's behavior was motivated by bias and misconduct. The contrast between her composure and his instability was unmistakable. Her preparation, intelligence, and discipline had turned the tables completely. Finally, the judge addressed the courtroom. The officer's misconduct was documented, undeniable, and supported by multiple witnesses. The false accusations were exposed, leaving no room for doubt. The judge acknowledged her preparation, calm authority, and integrity, recognizing the thoroughness of her evidence and testimony. The courtroom atmosphere shifted, from tension and uncertainty to clarity and justice. Her careful, strategic approach had ensured that the truth was revealed. As the hearing concluded, she remained composed, thanking witnesses and acknowledging the process without boast or triumph. Her focus had been on clarity, justice, and truth, not on ego or victory. The officer left the courtroom, visibly defeated, his attempts to manipulate and intimidate exposed fully. She had achieved justice not through confrontation or aggression, but through patience, preparation, and the careful collection of evidence. The community watching the proceedings gained a new understanding. They saw her integrity, intelligence, and calm authority, realizing that appearances could be deceiving. Her quiet strength, honed through years of discipline and experience, had allowed her to stand against false accusations and emerge victorious. The respect she had earned through her actions was genuine, not manufactured, and her example demonstrated the power of preparation and clarity under pressure. After the hearing, she returned home reflecting on the events of the day. She had faced the challenge with patience, focus, and precision, using her skills to expose the truth and ensure justice. She had turned a dangerous situation into a demonstration of integrity, intelligence, and calm authority. Her preparation, observation, and careful strategy had made all the difference. transforming the outcome from potential defeat to undeniable victory. As she sat quietly, she allowed herself a moment to acknowledge her own strength. She had faced a biased, aggressive officer who sought to intimidate and frame her, and she had responded with calm, careful strategy. Every step, every observation, every piece of evidence had contributed to the outcome. She had shown that discipline, preparation, and clarity of thought could overcome intimidation, bias, and falsehood. She reflected on the lessons of patience, careful observation, and strategic thinking. The confrontation had been challenging, but it had reinforced her understanding of her own abilities and her commitment to justice. She had faced a situation that many would have found overwhelming, yet she had navigated it with clarity and confidence, ensuring that truth and integrity prevailed. The day ended with a sense of quiet accomplishment. The officer's misconduct was exposed, the false accusations disproven, and her own composure and integrity recognized. The courtroom had witnessed her careful planning, strategic thinking, and calm authority. She had demonstrated that strength comes not from aggression, but from preparation, intelligence, and the ability to remain calm under pressure. Justice had been served, and she had done it with quiet confidence, resilience, and skill.